So I heard about this synagogue. It was a Shabbat morning service. Everything was going just like normal. And all of a sudden, right before the sermon, a lightning bolt hit the bima. Sparks and smoke everywhere. And with the smoke clear, there was a big demon right there. Very scary demon on the bima. Everybody, including the rabbi, they ran for their lives right away out of the sanctuary, except for one old lady, the first row. She was there as calm as she could be. And the demon looked at her and said, "Aren't you afraid?" She said, "Nah, I've been married to your brother for 50 years. I want to talk to you today about strong and fearless. Strong and fearless. And let me tell you something, because I don't know if you received notification from the synagogue and from other synagogues. There were lots of funerals in the last couple of weeks, and there are more coming into the next week. And there is one psalm that we always read, or is traditional to read during funerals and during unveiling sometimes, which is the 23rd Psalm. And it has a very interesting phrase, very interesting verse on that one. I don't know if you may remember this one. It said, "Though I walk through the valley of death," right? And it ends by saying, "I will not fear because you are with me." Okay? So, and that thing, I read it all the time. And sometimes on my head, I receive different words of inspiration from things like this. Like I could be in a funeral reading the words, and then sometimes I get something different every time I read it. And I was thinking about that strong emotion that is fear, and how we all feel fear one day or another, one moment or another. It's a very human emotion. Fear, and it's terrifying when fear hits our lives, right? But this is something that's what you would say in Scripture, the Torah, and in the prophets. There are lots of verses like that one from the book of Psalms that there will be words of encouragement for people to overcome fear. This is the interesting thing. It never said, do something so you will never feel fear. Because the Torah acknowledges that fear is part of nature. What it says is that we should always find a way to overcome that fear and get away. Don't let fear settle down and take over our lives. So, well, let me tell you something, because in this week's Parsha, the people of Israel experienced a big, terrifying moment. They felt fear, like I would say, they never experienced before in all the years of slavery. Because even after all the miracles, all the plagues that hit Egypt and the Egyptian, they were finally free, but they were now in front of the Red Sea, and they couldn't cross to the other side. Well, an obstacle, you may say, yeah, except that in the back, the Egyptian army was running after them. Want to guess what they felt at that moment? They were probably terrified. They probably felt fear like they never felt before, and they didn't know what to do. They never know what to do. And if you read around and if you picture the situation, there were basically three options for them at that specific time. Option number one, we are afraid, let's go back to Egypt. Option number two, do nothing. Right? Sometimes when you feel fear, you may be petrified, that you feel that you can't move, you can't do anything. Option number three, let's find a way to cross to the other side. And we all know that eventually option number three was the one. But even Moses didn't know what to do until God said, number one, stop complaining. I love that. I love that about it. Stop complaining. And then it says, raise your staff. Because remember, Moses was walking everywhere with his staff. Raise your staff, the waters will open and you will make it to the other side. And it's interesting because Moses has this staff in his hand all the time, but it's almost like because of the fear that he probably felt as well, he forgot about it. He forgot that the solution of his problems were right here in his hand. All he had to do is to raise the staff, the waters will open, because he did it before. And he forgot, because that's what fear creates in our lives. We forget about our own strength. And it's interesting, this the staff that Moses had. The very first time that God asked Moses to perform a miracle to start all this process of liberation, Moses needed to do something in front of the Egyptians, and God said to Moses, God asked Moses, Moses, what do you have in your hand? And Moses said, a stick, a staff. It's okay. Throw it to the floor, and then remember, it became a snake. But it's interesting, again, back then, weeks ago, God already said, the solution is in your hand. But it looks like Moses kept forgetting again and again how much of the solution he already had on himself. And I believe this is something that happens to all of us. We get afraid when we don't have what it takes to overcome our problems. And that's a fact. Because if you are confident that you have what it takes to go to the other side, if you have what it takes to overcome whatever problem you may have in your life, you won't feel fear because you're confident of what we had. But sometimes the problem is when either we forget or we don't have what it takes to make it to the other side. And that's why I like another verse of the Bible when God said to Joshua, you know, Joshua, the next leader after Moshe, God said to Joshua, be strong and courageous, don't be afraid. And I said, this is amazing, because God didn't say to Joshua, don't be afraid. That's valid, right? God could have said to Joshua, don't be afraid, go fight them. Don't be afraid. But God doesn't say that. God said, be strong. What does it mean strong? Become strong. Because if you feel that you're weak right now, you probably are. So the first thing you have to do is train yourself. Do what you have to do so you will become strong to do what you have to do. After you become strong, after you have the tools you need, then be courageous and trust on whatever you have. And only then, don't be afraid. And this is something that we forget because this is something that we all do in our lives. It's easy to say to somebody else, oh, come on, don't be afraid. Now we're thinking sometimes saying that to somebody else could even be mean if the other person doesn't have what it takes to face their fears. Sometimes being afraid is the right reaction to whatever you have in front of you, because it will be foolish and dangerous to try to face it without the right tools. And I was thinking, is Renan there? My son is there. He never likes when I talk about him. But this is something good, buddy, so don't worry. I remember when we used to go with Renan to the Panam pool. He likes to jump from the boards. And then the first time, he didn't jump. And I said, why not? I'm afraid. Okay? And then we went again. No, but then eventually we went, and he jumped from the tall one. I said, how come you jump now? I said, because now I'm ready. So sometimes asking to somebody else, don't be afraid when you know the person is not ready. When you know they don't have what it takes, it's not even inappropriate. It can't be mean. And that's why God didn't tell Joshua, don't be afraid. He said, no. Be strong, be courageous, and then don't be afraid. So Coming back to this parsha, when the people of Israel were in front of the Red Sea, I guess the fear made them forget how powerful they already were. And that's why some of them wanted to do nothing, some of them wanted to go back to Egypt. But as soon as they remember everything that they have for them, they were able to make it to the other side. So we all have challenges in our lives. And I won't tell you, don't be afraid. What I will tell you is what God told Joshua. Sometimes it's our responsibility to get stronger. It's our responsibility to train ourselves so whenever a challenge hit, we will be prepared to face it. This is the same, and we read this in this parsha at the very end. And I'm glad that we read this year the third part of Parsha Beshalach, and it's with Amalek attack the Jewish people. It's at the very end. If you go back to the book of Deuteronomy, at the very end with Moses is doing a recap of the Torah. When Moses is remembering that episode, he said, Amalek attacked you because you were weak and you were tired. And sometimes we take that as a criticism to Amalek. Look how cowards they are, right? That they attack the weak and the tired. But I read it the other way around. I think God is saying to the Jewish people, this is your fault because you allow yourself to be weak and tired. And this is something that we see in every generation. Whenever we have anti-Semitism coming our way, we are afraid. Aren't we? We are afraid. Look what happened in the past with the Jewish people. But there is a big difference. We are at a better situation now. We are strong. We are courageous. We didn't allow in this generation to be weak. We are not allowing ourselves to get tired. So we have what it takes to face all the anti-Semitism that we see around us. We have, even in Winnipeg, we have a strong Jewish Federation. We have strong synagogue. We have passionate advocates that they are helping to fight all this hate. So we have what it takes. So now I can tell you, don't be afraid. Because we have what it takes to make it to the other side. So, every time you face fear, remember what you have. And let me tell you, fear, F-E-A-R, could be forget everything and run, or it could be face everything and rise. The choice is yours. Shabbat Shalom.